Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Amicable Divorce Network podcast. My name is Tracy Ann Moore Grant. I'm the founder of the Amicable Divorce Network and a host for the Amicable Divorce Network podcast. If you've been paying attention and listening to season 2, you know that we are going chapter by chapter through our new book, Divorce Amicably, Your Roadmap to Resolution, which gives you very actionable tips and information on how to divorce efficiently, low conflict, save your time, money, and sanity through the divorce process. I am joined today by one of our board members, one of our founding members, and almost a mega author for the book, Stephanie Robbins. I think she wrote the second most number of chapters and is giving lots of great information to people on how you can navigate your divorce better and make some good decisions. Thank you for joining me again, Stephanie.
Thank you, Tracy, for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Stephanie's a mental health professional and is in Alpharetta, Georgia. And so we've had the opportunity to work together quite a lot and get to know each other personally. And so we are going to be going over today a few of the topics and put them into one podcast episode. So right now we're on chapter 35, which is going public with your divorce, but we're also going to touch on some of the tips in chapter 36 and 37. And so Stephanie, why did you think a chapter was needed on when people should go public with their divorce?
Well, divorce is a really major thing that people go through in their lives. As I've spoken to other chapters, going through the grief process, it's a loss. And sometimes people are excited to talk about going through the divorce, and some people are a little hesitant or feel vulnerable because they're going through a divorce, maybe because it was not their decision, it was kind of like they blindsided or not. But going public is kind of the big announcement, and how you go public kind of shapes how things will be for you and your family if you have kids in the future. What I realized is that when people go public, the way they tell people can impact on how they get reactions from others. Because other people might be receptive and be like, yay, I'm so happy for you. Or others are like, why would you do this? How can you go through this? Why would you put yourself in such a stressful situation? Is this good for the kids? You're breaking up a family. So there's a lot of emotions, such as fear, the grief. Some people have the relief. It makes you definitely vulnerable. There's that judgment from society, from family, friends. And then the other thing about going public is the timing, just making sure actually in your divorce process, like, when do you want? Some people think the minute you think of the actual divorce, or when you file the papers, or when you move out of the house.
And you touched on sort of the two categories of people. Often there's people who are like, great, we always thought that person was a bad match for you. And sometimes that is worse because you're like, well, I've been with this person for all these years and you felt this way. And so, then you're like, well, that's not any better than the people who are like, oh gosh, what are you doing here? And they want to judge your decision. I think something that's important for people to know is everybody's going to have an opinion.
Yes.
And you need to make the decisions that are best for you and your life, and not really listen to, all these people that are now going to probably give their 2 cents. And so that's something I think that you touch on in your chapter is be prepared emotionally when you do make that announcement or start telling people that there's going to be a lot of opinions that are going to come.
Exactly. Being prepared emotionally, being able to have scripts of what to say, especially when people start getting nosy or questioning, well, why? Well, sometimes people have a good reason why, but they don't want to share it. So there's some sort of infidelity. It could be, intimacy or even financial or other situations that they don't want to leak out to the public. And so how to respond to that is, we've made this decision. We like to keep things private, but thank you for your concern and we appreciate the support. Something simple like that.
Much like you see celebrities put out, we appreciate your appreciate our privacy during this time, something like that is always good. So one of the tips that you've touched on is that it could be a bad decision to announce too soon that you're getting a divorce. And so touch a little bit on that.
Well, if you announce too soon and haven't dealt with your feelings, you might emotionally break down. You might make some irrational decisions or say things or do things that can impact your case. It's also sometimes the people that you announce it to can rev you up. They might have their opinions, such as, well, so-and-so got divorced. They got $10,000 of alimony. Well, they don't know what the laws are. They don't know your specific situation, but they give this advice. It can make you even more anxiety because you're thinking, well, my attorney didn't say I could get that, or what if I do this? And then it causes problems with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and everybody needs to understand it's very similar to going to a doctor. Nobody's going to get the same case, the same diagnosis, the same settlement, the same facts. Everybody's different. And so every situation is different. Just like you wouldn't expect if your friend went in for a physical, they're going to get the same supplements and medication and treatment plan as you. It's all very individualized.
Exactly. And I always tell people, whoever you go to for advice, look at their situation. If they've not gone through it, they might have their ideal image of what divorce looks like. Or they've had, say your friend that you're going to was a child of divorce, and it was like, when you guys went through this, you're going to hurt your children, don't do this. They're bringing their own situation and advice to it. But professionals, that's why I say go to a therapist. They will give you good advice and help you cope with emotions. Talk to your attorney about the legal. Talk to your financial person about the financial stuff. Use your experts to help you.
Yes. And I always have people who come to me and say, oh, my sister said, or my friend or something. And a lot of times they don't even live in the same state. And so they're like giving secondhand information or something from Google. And so divorce information is also even different county to county in the United States. And so it's, just important to get the correct information from the right professionals. And, maybe say to your, friends, like, I don't really want to talk about my divorce, but I would just love to go to the farmer's market this weekend and do something different, try to pivot them maybe towards something that would be more helpful for you than to be getting advice from people who mean well, but often don't have the best information.
Yeah, and in the chapters, I talk about boundaries, setting those boundaries with people, and that's why the scripts I find are good. Because you just don't know what to do in certain situations. You don't want to upset whoever you're trying to get support from, but you also want to set that boundary for your own personal emotional safety and health too.
Yeah. And so when you talk about the scripts, where do people get those? Where they come up with those?
Well, in the book, I think there's some scripts in there. Like I said, we decided the divorce is like private, or like scripts, also like how to tell your children about the divorce. That's a going public thing where you may have not been ready to tell the children, but you wanted your family and friends to get that support. And you don't want it to be leaking, like what the neighbor said, so that's where you kind of have to wear the white gloves and look with caution with
Yes. And it's also important, what you point out, for people to stay clear-headed as much as possible throughout this process. And you caution people against emotional decision-making. So, talk from a very basic level about emotional decision-making.
So when we make decisions when we're not clear-headed, we're not calm, making decisions based on emotions of fear, guilt, vulnerability, we don't think through things fully.
Anger,
may want to get revenge against the ex, or making fear-based decisions and not being willing to negotiate, or not being able to hear the advice from, their attorney who's trying to give them the proper legal advice that could help their case. Or sometimes what happens is people are so emotional, they'll just give up everything and just be like, well, just give them everything, and then later the whole regret. That's why you don't want to have to regret. This is a major life decision. It affects you, and if you have children, it affects their life too.
Yeah. I see that often where people want the divorce to be over so quickly that they don't take proper recommended steps that really don't add a lot of time. It could be, let's just get a value of this pension. Might add a week to the case, but you're going to have this, really known value, and that's so much better for you. Some people, are just like, I just want it done. And then they really sell themselves short in the settlement without taking some time to process it. It's a very important transaction document. It deals with everything in your case, so don't make those knee-jerk decisions.
And a lot of times people have a lot of misconceptions of how fast it's going to go or done, and that's another thing when public, talking to friends and other people. One person might have a 31-day divorce, another one might have 3 years, and they think it's just really fast. The legal system is a slower process than most people, and there are a lot of people going through a divorce right now. So
yes, it's important, when we talk about comparing yourselves to other cases. Definitely an amicable divorce is swifter and more streamlined than, going through the court system. When you're in the court system, you're entirely a captive of the court's schedule. When they're available, did they get sick? Did they go on a vacation? Those are just the sort of things that, you're, bound by. We have more flexibility with an amicable divorce, but even so, people may need different experts. They may need to hit the pause button for a child or, something like that. So just know that every situation is different and don't be comparing yourselves.
Exactly.
And so recognizing your emotions, how can people do that? I find when people are really stressed and upset, they don't know that they're stressed and upset. So what tips can we provide?
Well, so for one thing, like when I work with clients, just in general, people start focusing too much in the past, not able to let go. A lot of times they're going through some sort of depression. Now, going through a divorce is like an adjustment. It's a life transition. People may be more susceptible for depression or have some of those depressive thoughts, which might not be deep depression. But if you're more focused in the past, having a hard time letting go, holding on to that anger towards, the loss of the hopes and dreams, anger towards your ex, that could be one thing. One of the other ways to feel like realizing your emotions is when you think too far in the future and you get anxious. Now, you're going through a divorce, you have to think about the future, but sometimes we get emotionally blocked where we can't really see beyond tomorrow. People will get overwhelmed like, oh my gosh, I'll have to get a job, or will I be able to afford this? How will I be, will I ever get married again? These type of things. So anxiety is when people look too far in the future. So what I help people with is stay in the present, being mindful of what's going on to help keep those emotions in check. Best ways for people to really help kind of stabilize their emotions is to definitely talk to a therapist, getting community connection, connect with friends. If there's any type of spiritual or church or synagogue or any type of religious support or community is great. Journaling, exercising, finding new hobbies, really connecting more with your kids, being present for that. That helps the emotions when people are kind of having ups and downs.
Yeah.
Also, one thing about people don't realize, it's a wave. You might not have all these emotions every day. You might be having a great day and then something triggers it. And it could be something as small as, for instance, I had a client who went into the Disney store with her kids and then just started breaking down because she realized, wait a minute, I haven't been able to take the kids to Disney. We were going to do that as a family. What if the other parent decides to take them before me? I want to have the first experience of them seeing the castle and the princesses. So that trigger, you don't even think about until you're in a situation like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've had several cases that involve issues with Disney like that, so that I definitely see that as well. What are some healthy ways that people can process their emotions? They recognize they have anger, grief, different things. How can they deal with it?
Well, like with the anger, really looking at it, anger is not just anger. It's like a pyramid iceberg with a whole bunch of other emotions. So the other secondary emotions can be, embarrassment, frustration, worry about different things in the future. So figuring out specifically what that other emotion could be and trying to work on that. So if it's some sort of like you feel embarrassed, well, realizing, well, why is divorce make you? What kind of things have you been told about divorce? Has it, what is your thoughts about it? And also going to like a professional to talk about it, to process it. Sometimes, you just need to just discuss what you're feeling and realizing it's normal and that it's okay. Or it's a phase of, in the psychology stages of divorce, I talk about all the different types of emotions, and there's different parts of the process where you're going to feel certain things.
Yeah, definitely. See people go through that all the time, where they, start out in a certain way and it's so hard for them to, get past some things. But then I sometimes explain it's like walking up a hill and it's going to be hard, but when you get to the top, it's all downhill from there in regards to, the process. There might be some little bumps along the way, but it is a journey. And so, be kind with yourself, during this as well. You talk about how rushing through the divorce and, there's some other common mistakes can really hurt people. We've sort of touched on people who want to just go so fast. They just want it to be over with. It is unpleasant. Absolutely. Nobody wants to marinate in their divorce process. But another tip you have that I'm passionate about is when people are not truthful with their attorney. So I definitely endorse this tip, but tell me why as a mental health professional you think it's important.
Well, sometimes people just have, sometimes society will say, oh, your attorneys, don't trust them, they lie, this and that, or people are embarrassed to give their attorney full information because they might have done something. Like I've had clients send nasty emails or done some really irrational things like showing up at the workplace of their ex or doing things that are not really great, but they know that it was wrong, and then they don't want to tell their attorney. The attorney finds out from the other attorney, like, hey, all these different things. Also, a lot of times I find that people don't communicate to their attorneys that they're overwhelmed. A lot of times there might be discovery of different things, or they've never, like example about the finances, they never wrote a check or a bill. They don't know how to even access things, and they're afraid to tell the attorney, like, my spouse never gave me the passwords, and then they feel like they were just just coasting along, and then they realize, wait, I should have been more involved in finances. But
right.
Attorney's there to work for you. They're looking out for your best interest. So lying to them is not great.
Yeah, no, I have two things that come up that you've touched on. And one is people don't give me all the information about the things that they have done, whether it's infidelity or, something else. And I can't give them the right advice or help them or tell them a realistic outcome without all the facts. And sometimes the other attorney has more facts than I do, and that doesn't put me in a good spot of being able to help my client. Sometimes you learn things for the first time from somebody else. And so also I find people like, well, like you touched on, I was embarrassed. I'm a divorce attorney. I have heard everything, I promise you, and I'm here to help, and it's also confidential. And so, know that I have to have all of the information, and every divorce attorney does. Because if we're giving you, oh, I think this case will take so long, or, here's a likely result, that all of that is just a waste of time without all of the correct information. So, don't waste your own time and money. And sometimes I don't hear from clients for a while, and I'll, be like, I haven't heard from you. Is everything okay? It's totally fine to also tell your divorce attorney, like, I'm not having a great week. I know I'm supposed to update this or that, or we're supposed to have this appointment. Just be honest. We're very used to, dealing with people going through this process. And as long as you tell us what's going on, and we may have some additional resources to help as well, but that helps us know how to help other people.
And, I always say people's behavior, there's always like kind of a reasoning behind it. If they're avoiding contacting their attorney, it might be they're afraid they're going to get billed for every phone call, every email, but it's important to communicate. Or if they're kind of going through a depression and they're just kind of like self-isolating. Worried, or sometimes people will delay the process because the future scares them so much, the fear of uncertainty. So if they delay it, then it won't become real.
Yeah.
Really, there's all these emotions, and that could be a reason why sometimes they don't contact their attorney or are fully truthful. Also, there's a lot of misinformation. People may not be so assertive and really self-advocating. So being able to tell their attorney, like, I don't understand the process, why, they don't want to give the information because they think, well, it's too personal, too nosy. They don't want it to be a public record. Well, talking to an attorney to find out what is public, what's not, and how it's going to be used.
Yeah.
I always say,
and for the most part, the amicable process isn't in the public record. We just file settlement documents, informational documents. So a lot of that dirty laundry doesn't get aired. So it's a great option for people who are concerned about that as well. Whether it's somebody behaved badly or just you want to be more private with your finances. There's just lots of different benefits with that.
And it reduces conflict too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just realize, this is negotiating our lives, this is splitting our lives, different things. The public doesn't need to know. We don't need to cause all the stress that go into court. So I always recommend Amicable. I think it's the best process for people.
We sort of touched on this a little bit, but one of your common mistakes that you tell people to avoid is vilifying your spouse and wanting that day in court. I'm very passionate that you never really get that.
Yeah.
It's very expensive if you get a day in court. A lot of times what you're wanting to say isn't allowed by evidentiary rules, or if the judge hears it, it just doesn't matter in the way that you think that it will. Do you agree? Do you have different reasons for recommending that as a mental health professional, that they sort of step away from that?
Well, just vilifying your spouse does nothing that's good. It causes that negative energy, the anger. If you do have children with your spouse, vilifying them, making them bad, this is still the child's parent, the other parent. Or, vilifying might be because you want to feel like you're a victim and get support from others. It's just, that day in court, like you said, people don't get that. Some people just want to expose everything. They want to do the dirty laundry, which is really not necessary. It's like in the short term, you're like, oh, yay, that feels good. And you're going to have regrets. It doesn't make you feel any better. It just makes you not move forward. And it kind of makes you become more of a negative person and could become the villain in general.
Yeah. And honestly, a lot of times people go on such an emotional journey that if you've chosen the litigation route because you want this day in court, by the time you get there, you're over it. And so you've made a very expensive decision to take this road. And by the time you're there, 18 months and $60,000 later, you're sort of like, oh, well, maybe we could have handled this differently, but you're sort of committed to that path. So, really think about that. Another tip that you have in regards to a common mistake is that failing to stay organized or providing information to your attorney. But the organized thing caught my attention. Some people just aren't organized. So what tips can you provide them?
Well, so, going to a divorce coach or even a therapist that works with people, sometimes getting organized is overwhelming. You might have the most organized people in other things, but they don't know how to organize it. Because it's so emotionally tied, the organization stuff might be a little bit more difficult. So having, even if you have a friend sit there with you and help you organize the paperwork or organize things that you need to gather for the attorney. And also realizing, coming up with the budget that you have to submit or different financials, that needs to be organized.
Yeah. And just a reminder, we use detour.life program, and you can get that on your own prior to meeting with an attorney, even if your attorney doesn't use it. And it takes you step by step through all the financial matters. You can drop documents in there. And even if your attorney doesn't use that program, what you would present to them is so organized that it will save you so much time and money, and also helps you with decision making and clarity. You're like, oh, this is the budget. I thought this was worth more, and it really gets the information in everybody's hand.
It also gives people some sort of empowerment too. They feel like they're in control of something that they're not really in control of. So when you can be organized. And actually I see a lot in women, they go into this survival mode, or when they have to organize things, it's they sometimes can shut down the emotional part and just be more cerebral or cognitive of things, and it helps them get through that. The organization kind of helps them with that anxiety too.
Yeah, that's true. It gives you something really productive to focus your attention on, as opposed to just the emotions. You need to get the taxes, you need to get this statement, you need to, work on these different items that are really helpful overall for your case. One of the tips that you say a common mistake is oversharing on social media. I can't agree more. What is your perspective on that?
Well, for one thing, social media, what's out there stays out there. A lot of things are misperceived by others or gossip. It can always come back to burn you if you say something negative about your spouse, or if you're saying I have no money and you're going on all these vacations. That disconnect, it always talk to your attorney also. If you start a new relationship, don't change your status on Facebook and saying in a relationship. And then having your ex see that on there, or somebody that's a friend of the ex telling the ex, can cause some issues too.
Yeah. Or you get tagged in a picture at an event you aren't supposed to be at, when the kids are with the babysitter, and it causes all kinds of problems. I think something else that people don't understand is when you're in the litigation path, parties go through what's called discovery, which is where you have the right to get any information that could lead to relevant evidence. It doesn't have to be relevant to begin with. And a very common request is for people to download their social media history. And you can do that very easily on Facebook, Instagram. Just poke around in the settings and you'll see that. And the attorney will get your chat. They will get what you liked, what groups you joined, what pages got a thumbs up, all those different types of things. If you were making comments on somebody else's page about, your spouse or, something else, like all of that is part of that data. Even if you delete it, like it'll say then deleted, it doesn't go away. It is a permanent record.
And it can haunt people too.
Absolutely. And depending on the age of your kids, even if they're young, they go back on, social media for several years, when they get on there to look at their parents, all that'll be on there as well if it's negative. And so just be very mindful of that.
Also, you brought in a point about your kids. You might be sharing things about your kids and not thinking about, wait, in the future, they may not have wanted you to make fun of them because they made some cute little comment.
Yeah.
And you don't think about how that affects them, and then they become teenagers and like, Mom, why did you say that?
Oh yeah.
Why are you posting that horrible picture?
Exactly. Yeah, they hate everything when they're a teenager. So if you are listening and want more of these great tips, I will direct you to the Amicable Divorce Network book, Divorce Amicably, Your Roadmap to Resolution. And we were talking today about chapters 35, 36, and 37. Chapter 37 in particular has a list of common mistakes. We don't have time to go through all of them. We hit the highlights, but this is a great chapter to review and reflect and think about. Usually when I have clients who read this chapter, they get a little aha moment, like I won't do that anymore on Facebook, or, I will be a little bit more organized. And so it's a very good actionable chapter. Stephanie, for people who are listening and they want to reach out to you and work with you, what is the best way for them to reach you?
The best way to reach me is going to my website, which is alpharettafamilytherapy.com. My phone number's on there. If you give me a text, I can definitely text back, but that's the best way. You can send me an email through there or get my phone number and give me a text. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. And if you're driving, her information will be in the show notes. So save the episode and follow the podcast for more episodes and tips. And you can always find Stephanie and our other professionals in the member directory at amicableddivorcenetwork.com. Stephanie, thank you so much for your contributions to the book and all these important tips.
Thank you, Tracy, for having me today. And I enjoyed being part of the book. Thank you.